the devil. Well, what this makes me think, and Scorpio is a good opportunity to remember that, we've all institutionalized things in our own lives. We've all established rules and structure. Don't you talk to me like that. Well, that's how I talk to her. Well, nobody talks to me like that. Well, that's your rule. You've instituted it, and you're doing your best to enforce it. And the point is that we've all institutionalized patterns in our lives. And in this process of transformation that Uranus and Pluto is about, it is, as we mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily about changing the government or changing large institutions. It's also about looking at where you're getting stuck in patterns and whether those rules that you have are really helpful at this point. It's worth asking.
Yeah, and I think what you said is very valuable, Jeff. And I think everything that you said is even doubled down today. Because today we have the Sun, which makes a conjunction from Earth's point of view with all of these slow-moving outer planets once a year. Because the perspective is the Earth goes around the Sun, so it looks like the Sun lines up with each of the outer planets once a year. And today, the Sun at 14 degrees of Scorpio is lined up with Saturn, the planet of control, the planet of authority, the planet of stomping down or holding back expression. Certainly is indicative of what we saw perhaps, at least in that aspect of the election. But this is not a game ender. What Saturn, Jeff often says that Saturn is the planet that says no but means yes. And what he means by that is that Saturn wants things to happen, and often when we act hastily, they don't happen correctly. So maybe if we looked at the higher side of just sticking with this GMO thing for a minute, because there are many people who are for full disclosure in labeling of food that look at that law and say it was not a good law. So maybe, because there were so many things that were excluded, so maybe this is an opportunity to go back and get it right, to do it in a way that they can't push it down because of what didn't work about it. By the same token, today is a good day for each of us to look in our own lives and to see what it is that isn't working. Where have we bumped into resistance? Where are the problems that we keep facing again and again and again? And instead of saying, it's not working, or it's making me do that, or he won't, or she won't, look at it and say, what can I do so that I can make it myself better enough that I won't run into that problem again and again and again?
Yeah, well put, because the Sun represents will or intention, and Saturn is application in the material world. So even though the Sun-Saturn conjunction was today, its influence is going to linger for a couple of days, so that if you want to start a healthy habit, if you want to begin a commitment to anything, you've got an opportunity to sort of grab a hold of structure and start to lay down the track, to start to find the rails that are going to take your life in a direction that you want it to go. Now, mature people understand that they can't control everything that's happening in their world.
Oh,
yeah, that's the way it goes.
Bummer.
And that, even though the Sun is joined with Saturn, this is intense, this is focused, part of the test down the road is how you stick to your commitment even when you're thrown a curve. There will be surprises. There are things that may tempt to disrail the train of direction that you're on. And the point is that you don't have to be so rigid that if you miss one day of exercise or if you meditate 2 minutes less on a given day, that you just give it up. This is about persistence and principle. If you persist with principle and practice, actually, that are important to you, slight deviations are not going to alter your course. So success is often determined by this combination of having a focus, having a commitment, but also having enough internal confidence and maturity to recognize the moments when you've got to delay, step back, or work around. If we're overly rigid, all we're going to get is frustration. that's not just because of Sun-Saturn. I think that's how life often works.
Now, although the Uranus-Pluto square is a big part of the month and will come back into play in a few days as Venus moves through Capricorn and makes contact with it, the Uranus-Pluto is an important piece of the month. The Saturn is an important piece of the month, not only because of today's conjunction by the Sun, but later in the month when Mercury comes back and lines up with Saturn, it'll bring this stuff that Jeff just talked about back into focus again. However, I want to shift gears here for a second and talk about Jupiter, which is kind of separate from the pack. Jupiter has been moving forward in Cancer. It moved into Cancer last summer. And today, Jupiter stations, meaning that it stops. From Earth's point of view, it looks like it stops to begin its retrograde period. And Jupiter, as it moves retrograde in Cancer, brings up a number of issues that I think become important to this month's story, partly, or let's say corroborated by the fact that as the Sun moves away from its conjunction with Saturn, it will form a harmonious trine with Jupiter, and then later as Venus does the same, as Mercury does the same, as it lines up with Saturn, it too will form a trine with Jupiter. So I think this Jupiter piece is an important piece, almost like an antidote to the heaviness of Saturn.
Yeah, I agree. The exact Sun-Jupiter trine, the most harmonious angle between planets, 1/3 of the circle, a trine. Astrology's traditional lucky planet, Jupiter, and the Sun, that's on October 12th, that's quite visionary. But I want to just dig in a little bit deeper into Jupiter, the planet of expansion, belief, and wisdom, stopping today and beginning to move backwards in the sign of Cancer. The downside of this, or a less than desirable expression of it, would be becoming so overly subjective about our beliefs that we don't want to listen to any other's point of view. Jupiter's the planet of belief and opinion. It's in Cancer, which is a very subjective, personal sign, and going backwards means going inward. The upside is finding the truth within. The downside is denying anything that doesn't fit your inner truth. And astrological patterns do often work like the weather. In other words, we go, oh, it's a sunny day. Well, that might be great for you, but somebody else might get sunstroke or might sweat too much. You go, oh, this is a crappy day, it's a rainy day, and most people are going around made uncomfortable by the rain. And some of them are sitting by fireplaces with cups of tea.
And some of them are slugs
and love it.
This is
and love it. So even though we astrologers are describing sort of the shape and the color of the energetic waves as represented by the sun, moon, and planets, where you stand with those waves, what you do with them, is going to be the single largest determinant of the quality of experience that you have.
So this Jupiter beginning its retrograde phase becomes very important and becomes heightened as the Sun, as Jeff said, on November 12th, forms an exact trine with Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is the largest planet of the real planets in the solar system. And it's so big that Jupiter and the Sun together make up, I don't know, 110% of the volume. I'm kidding. They make up like 99% of the entire mass of the solar system. Together they are huge. And when Jupiter and the Sun form this trine, like Jeff says, this is a good news day. The problem with good news days, though, is that we can forget the bad news that we heard the day before, or that'll still be there when this trine begins to dissipate in a few days. The way to make the most out of a trine like the positive, confident, optimistic trine between Jupiter and the Sun Think of it like on the old merry-go-rounds where you grabbed for the golden ring. You may not get it, you have to reach far, but you don't want to reach so far that you fall off the horse. That's not good. And you also need to understand that just because you grab it doesn't mean that the ring you get will be gold. In other words, it's not about getting what we're reaching for here. It's about having the courage, the optimism, and the confidence to actually stretch farther than we normally do, understanding that it's not about whether we get what we want, it's about learning how to stretch farther. That's what the good news side of this Sun-Jupiter trine is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's good. Another thing, Jupiter, as I mentioned, was in Cancer, which is a sign of the family. And perhaps Jupiter turning retrograde today, or beginning to shift into reverse today, may awaken some appreciation for traditional wisdom or for wisdom in your own family. If, like most of us, you're very aware of the flaws and imperfections of your parents and those who raised you and have grown by sort of branching out in your own direction, we still are connected to the roots that gave us life. And if your relationship, whether it's in your mind or in actual practice, with your family of origin, with your ethnic group, is off, this is a time to recover some of the wisdom that's there. Not to make the family all right about everything, but to recognize some of the gifts that maybe came in forms that you couldn't appreciate before, but are able to take in now in a constructive way.
And although everything that Jeff and I have been saying about this certainly is valid, there's another piece that makes it even more valid, and that is, and we're not showing the lines to the moon, the aspects to the moon, because it's just sometimes too confusing, but the moon, on the day that the Sun trines Jupiter, on the 12th, the Sun in water sign Scorpio trines Jupiter in water sign Cancer, and the moon in water sign Pisces finishes out this triangle to make what we astrologers call a grand water trine. This is ostensibly very stable and very supportive, almost to the extent that it can make us so lazy that we don't do something about it, because it holds the patterns that already are. But I just wanted to mention that in passing. And although the Sun trine Jupiter theoretically should be days arriving and leaving, I don't think we get to hang on to the energy too long, because as we mentioned earlier, Venus moving through Capricorn by the 12th, 13th, exact on the 14th and 15th, Venus lines up with the Pluto-Uranus square, and I think that it's not negative, but I think it takes that Jupiter energy and it just rattles it, electrifies it.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts about that. One, in a very practical way, around the 12th, and on the 12th if you can, take some time just to dream, to vision, to imagine, to expand your view of the reality in which you are living at the moment, to sort of allow inspiration to give you a bigger picture. And what happens sometimes is we can have a big dream, a big picture, and you go, that's out of reach. I'm never going to get there. But it still pulls you in a direction of growth and expansion that makes that contemplation worthwhile. I want to back up and talk about something Rick jumped into, and I don't think we laid the foundation, and that's Venus and Capricorn. Now, Venus is the planet of love. Venus is the principle of personal worth and pleasure and beauty. And yesterday, Venus changed signs. She went from, hi sailor, I'll try anything, once or 10 times.
In Sagittarius.
To Capricorn, which says, let me check your credit card before I even go out with you. Venus, the planet of love and affection and approval, is in Capricorn, which is a sign of ambition, dominance, and control. And that represents, I think, a significant contrast which plays its own role in reshaping our perspective of relationships. Join Rick Levine and Jeff Jower for their annual forecast seminar at beautiful Brighton Bush Hot Springs, Oregon from January 10th through 12th next year. For details, go to brightonbush.com. That's BREITENBUSH.com. Join astrologers Jeff Jower, Alan Oken, Aaron Sullivan, and Lauren Albandian for the Wisdom of Astrology Conference from March 29th to April 4th, 2014 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. For details and registration, go to alanoken.com or click the link on the front page of stariq.com.